Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Vibrant Networking Forum's session on the recovery, the way the recovery is happening. We are out of the lockdown, we are in unlock two, and with me this evening, we have two very esteemed businessmen of North India. The one in the red t-shirt is Sachit Jain with his nice goatee. Sachit is in IIT Delhi and I am Ahmedabad and Stanford graduate, multiple qualifications, multiple roles in various industries. Right now, he is responsible for Vardhaman Specialty Steels Limited in Ludhiana. He's the CEO of that company. Uh, the other gentleman in that lovely Modi jacket is Pranav Gupta. Pranav is a classmate of mine from school. That aside, he is also the founder of Parabolic Drugs, is the founder trustee of Ashoka and Plaksha universities and Jamboree Education as well. So, good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Vibrant. And my first question, Sachit, I will start with you. What was the general impact of COVID on the manufacturing sector in specifically the reports you got in your industry and in the region that you are in? Because Ludhiana is the hub of manufacturing in North India.
Thanks, Chatty. Hi, Pranav.
Hi.
I think the immediate impact was with the lockdown, everything got shut, the entire manufacturing facilities got shut, retail got shut. So, sales immediately went down to zero of our final product in our chain, which is two-wheelers and cars and so on. And we produce steel for the automotive sector, so immediately our sales went down to zero. You didn't know when this would start. So there's a massive drop in production. May we started our factory, so we had a little bit of production in May, a little higher in June. So really, the first quarter has been very difficult in terms of loss of production, loss of sales, and therefore losses. And the big debate how to pay your salaries and wages and so on, what to do about that. So it's a very tough period for the entire manufacturing industry across the country and therefore Punjab also.
Pranav, services sector, how did this impact? Because education, online education, I believe was a big boom, but we'll go there a little later. But initial impact of the lockdown on your industry.
So, Chatty, my sense is thanks Chatty for introducing me. And my sense is that the services sector, which is approximately 55% of our GDP, is a very critical, important sector. So there were obviously been sectors like civil aviation, health, consulting, legal. They all got affected in a massive way. And obviously there are certain sectors like e-commerce platforms, especially which were not built on asset base, like platforms like Uber, platforms like Airbnb, which were asset based, got affected. So there were certain sectors within the services sector which didn't get affected, but broadly the services sector has taken a huge hit too, because as Sachit rightly mentioned, people were not getting paid. The services is really an outcome of income in your hand, whether it's a personal guy or a company. So it did get affected in a major way. From an education perspective, my sense is, Chatty, I can talk about Ashoka University. Ashoka, we had already built on online platforms. So proudly to announce that our exams were on schedule, our degrees were on schedule, and everything went on schedule. From our education consulting company, where we coach for GRE, GMAT, SAT, we had also invested in the online platforms. But we saw a huge shift in number of students enrolling on the consulting platforms, as there were internet issues, there were students who had difficulty spending an extended amount of time on the internet. So our sales have plummeted by about 60% on the consulting business. And on the overall education sector, I felt that a lot of universities, higher education, colleges and schools were just not ready for this huge disruption. And a lot of them had huge problems. Nobody had invested in these platforms. So it was a mixed bag.
Right. Still sticking with you, Pranav, are you seeing some revival in your sector happening? So there is also this great debate that I was watching at the start of this lockdown. and everybody was trying to pick up a letter of the alphabet. Will it be a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped recovery, a W-shaped recovery? So in your mind, is there a recovery happening? And if yes, which letter of the alphabet is it closest to?
So, Chati, I'll specifically talk about the education sector. And
Right.
our sense at Ashoka was that our number of admissions for students applying to Ashoka really doubled, because we compete students who enter Ashoka do end up also applying to other foreign universities and top universities, and that option for students has slowed down just because some of them don't want to go abroad because of the pandemic. There are visa issues and there are a lot of restrictions which the countries are imposing. So on the Ashoka side, we've seen a huge business grow. We are struggling with applications, and so that's been the good story. On our consulting business, I think it's going to be a V-shaped recovery. So the business has really plummeted to historical lows because there is a poor sentiment on students going abroad, which I said earlier. But we expect it to rebound. We expect it to rebound next year because our sense is that about 30 million people, Indian students, broadly go from class 12 to higher education in India or abroad. And that yield rate is about 25%. So that's 1:4, which is the poorest in the world, Chatti. Japan, US, and some of these regulated markets are about at 70-80%. Even China is at 50%. So we actually have to place 120 million into higher ed colleges, which is we are at 30 million. And the sad part is the higher education sector is just not coped up. We've not expanded enough. We've not had quality private players come into the higher ed sector. So there is going to be, from the consulting education abroad business, it's going to be a rebound back coming in next year just because we don't have the capacity. So we are looking at a V-shaped recovery on the education consulting business.
Sachit, same question at you. In manufacturing, is it V or is it going to be a more plateau at the bottom?
What we are seeing, Chadi, is that suddenly there is a massive demand. Our forecast estimates of production and estimates of lossability, I would say, are changing every 15 days. June was much better than what we anticipated. July is coming out even much better. So still behind last year, but the recovery is way faster than what I was estimating. Whether if I look at our textile business also, we are at almost full utilizations, very near that. Fabric in yarn, fabric is a little lower. But I see even in our steel business for the autos, because rural India is doing very well. So because of the previous crop was very good, the rabi crop was very good, and the farm sector was not affected too much by the lockdown. So with a good crop and the farm sector doing well, and I think the government has pumped in a lot of money in rural India. So the demand for tractors is very good, and therefore steel demand for tractors is very good. Demand for two-wheelers, motorcycles, which goes in again largely to rural India, that's doing very well. So, but what's the problem that we are seeing is the supply chain is getting affected because some people in the middle are having production problems because of labor shortages. And because of that, the demand at the far end is there, at the consumer end is there. We are able to produce and supply, but somewhere in the middle, the supply chain and logistics issues have come in. But those are getting sorted out. So I expect August to be better than July and September to be better than August. Every month on month, we are seeing better performance.
Well, that's indeed good news. So lots of green shoots and rural economy getting it a boost. How about urban? A lot of what you produce gets sold in the urban areas as well. The end products, I would say.
Yeah.
If not, you would know the percentages, but if you could throw some light on that as well, the urban demand, because Pranav's is a primarily urban sector. Yours is dual, right?
Yeah, dual. So urban sector, clearly there is lower demand. And I think, but the moment the lockdowns open, because currently still many of the large cities are in problem. So Chennai has just come out of lockdown. Bangalore is having some problems. Hyderabad is having problems. Delhi and Mumbai are, I think, peaking out and probably coming out of the problems. These are the big centers where a lot of high consumption happens in these cities. So currently with these cities coping with the COVID problem in a huge number, demand out there may not be as high. But I think in the next couple of months, demand from here will also pick up. And which is why today we are lower than last year, still lower than last year. But in the next couple of months, my belief is by the time Diwali comes up, which is really the peak buying season, Dhanteras before Diwali is where the maximum retail sales happen for two-wheelers, for example. We are also hearing that the schedules from our customers are much higher month on month. So September schedules from one of our customers, a couple of our customers, is really good. So with that, I presume that the urban should also take off. So overall, by the second half of this year, if you leave that the first half dip, which is massive, the last three quarters we may be equivalent or better than last year, something like that. So overall, we'll still be probably lower, but the second three quarters, the last three quarters will be better, equivalent, I would say.
That's interesting. If you're going to do last 3 quarters, will be better than last year. You're aiming for
No,
that.
could be. I said could be equivalent, or a little bit higher, a little bit lower. As of
Right.
now, the demand is strong.
Okay. So pretty much in line with a 3-4% GDP growth for India, which is what the government has also been arguing also been saying. That would push it. So, right. Okay. So Sachit, in Ludhiana, because industry in Punjab specifically, since you are also the chairman of the CII Northern Region, is it across industries that you're hearing this story? Because right now you're giving, specifically with the textile and the steel industry, but what about other industries, the auto ancillaries, you know?
Yeah, so I believe also the cycle industry is doing very well. So some of our friends have been, Ludhiana is a big center for cycle industry, tires. So those sectors are also doing better. And in general, during the COVID times, also the general groceries and the essentials were anyway doing well. So I think the manufacturing sector after sector, is in various stages of utilization. But I guess every month people are seeing an improvement. Some sectors will lag a little bit, some will go ahead a little bit more. But overall, on manufacturing side, I think things will be looking up better. It is the services side, I think, tourism and hotels and restaurants, where things could be a problem. But what we are also seeing is that workers are coming. The demand for workers is there, and there is a demand reverse migration back of migrants who left for the villages coming back in large numbers. So most companies which had shortage of workers in, let's say, June, are now getting those workers paid up, I guess.
Okay, Pranav. So Sachit is saying that some service sectors are not doing so well. Tourism, airlines, restaurants, bars. A lot of these things. Other than that, which are the sectors which are doing well in services and which are not doing so well? To throw some more light on that.
So as Sachit rightly said, obviously it's all around us that the hospitality sector is the worst hit. The civil aviation sector is the worst hit. The restaurant sector is under a lot of problem. Even legal services, which was slowly growing as becoming a major mainstay of the economy, is in a lot of problems just because courts are not functioning. Only important matters are being listed. I believe the consulting business is pretty down, just as corporates are just trying to manage their balance sheets for this year. But some of the sectors, as I mentioned before, the e-commerce sector, especially, which are doing online stuff, which don't have sit-based delivery platforms, are doing extremely well. So the education business, as I mentioned, Chatty, that once the pandemic happened, a lot of institutions, you'll be shocked to know that even IITs, which are the topmost institutions and where Sachit comes from, were not ready for online. They had disruptions in their teaching just because they were not ready with online platforms. So the education sector is catching up in a very fast way, and I'm sure they're going to just catch up fast. And they're now, most of the schools, colleges, universities we talk to have built on online platforms, and they've ramped up. So these are some of the sectors: e-commerce, education, the services sector. Otherwise, Chatty, pretty much the other sectors are not doing that well, and it's going to take a while before they come up.
So here is just some news that broke half an hour ago. A Chandigarh-based education preparation company was sold for $50 million about half an hour ago to another education company. So that I think because this company was in online, they got this huge spike in valuation. So Pranav, are you seeing some valuation changes also happening because you are in touch with a lot of angel investors in disease and stuff?
So, Chatty, my sense on the valuation front is that today is probably not a right time to talk about valuations because, as you understand, the balance sheets for this year are going to be very, very stretched. Whether it is the manufacturing sector, which is, as Sachit is saying, recovering much faster than the services sector, or the services sector, this year balance sheets are going to be under stress. So I feel that there are a lot of people wanting to acquire companies and consolidate, but I think there is going to be a challenge this year in terms of meeting the expectation of pricing between the seller and the buyer. The seller might want to just have a recovery come in and then talk about consolidation, etc. And the seller probably at this point is looking at a very, very deep discount in terms of acquiring a business. So from our sense, from our sense, we are looking at various platforms. We are looking at talking to people. We are also looking at private equity, etc. But I would say that this is not the right time to talk about it, and there's a huge difference in perception between the sellers and the buyers. Also, my sense going forward would be that in the services sector, your ability in your business to make the business digitally transform it will be very, very critical in terms of determining your valuation. So that has become a very, very important part of the business. If you are able to take your business online, if you're able to make it digitally savvy, that would add an extra bit on your valuation.
Right. So, Sachit, your take on this, will consolidation happen? And as Pranav is saying, that demand and supply between the price elasticity. Do you think a lot of products will become price inelastic? Will it lead to more monopolistic situations? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know about monopolistic situations, but clearly this is a time where some people are highly stressed because if you did not have a conservative balance sheet initially, managed many balance sheets and there are tipped some companies over. So clearly there are assets are available for sale. The question is even the acquiring companies have to watch their balance sheet, see what is the quality of the recovery. As I said, 15 days ago, my conversation would have been very different than what I'm having today. In the last 15 days, I'm seeing a change. People are going to be very cautious because still cash, you have to conserve cash, and cash is king because there's a steep recovery which is there. If there's a second round of COVID coming in and it really becomes a W, the next 1 year is definitely the time to conserve cash. I also see that there is an opportunity out here to improve operations, because we saw in this lockdown period for 3 weeks when the plants were shut, we used this opportunity to connect to our people virtually, and we found a huge number of areas for improvement. And we focused a lot on that, kept our people engaged together. Some over 2,000 suggestions came from our people on cost cutting, opportunities and problems we solved. We formed cross-functional teams to attack those problems. So normally what happens is people don't have time on a day-to-day basis. And here the plants were shut, so all operations were shut. Everybody is focused on improvements and communication and so on. So that has led to several areas of improvement. So I'm going to, as we're seeing that our factories are going to be operating far more efficiently than what they were operating earlier. So I'm sure many other good companies, larger companies have been doing that. They are all looking at efficiencies improvement. So they will see enough capacity coming up within their own companies. So the need to acquire may also go down a bit initially. But definitely many people will realize that in these tough times and uncertain times, if you are not competitive, you can't compete. So maybe it makes sense to sell out and merge and become part of a bigger operation. So I see more M&A going ahead. I agree with Pranav.
Would you suggest a compulsory 15-day lockdown every year just so that everybody can get their minds away from the? Would you suggest that?
I'm telling you, except for the financial impact, this lockdown has been very good for our company. And personally, for myself, I was walking 12 to 15 kilometers a day. So it was weather was excellent. So it was a great time. The air was clear and pollution levels were down. Sky blue. It was fantastic.
True. So, how did this impact the labor market? You did mention briefly, Sachit, that a lot of reverse migration is happening now. Is job creation happening per se in industry, manufacturing, because that is where a bulk of this migrant labor goes to.
Yeah. So as regards our company, we didn't have any trouble at all because we announced upfront that we are not cutting any salaries, we are not cutting any wages, no layoffs. We paid everybody, including our contractors, workers. Everybody got full salary, full wages. So we didn't lose anybody really from that point of view. But of course, there are always some people going back home and so on. So we didn't have any loss as our company. However, I was talking to many friends and many large number of companies in the area were facing labor shortages, so people are resorting to overtime, and some people are losing production. However, as the workers are coming back, we are seeing that this should start getting made up from July and this month as well as in August. So things are becoming
happening. Is that what you're saying? Job creation is beginning to happen now in the manufacturing.
No, definitely people are coming back. So there is no doubt about that.
So Pranav, similar question to you. We've heard that there were a lot of challenges, a lot of IT companies and services sector, a lot of the junior level people were either furloughed or laid off or whatever happened to them. Are those jobs coming back, or are we seeing those jobs lost forever?
So Chatty, as you know, the overall number which I have from now.
Sorry to cut in, but another challenge that happened with a lot of people in the services sector was they were forced to work from home, right? Which caused a lot of mental health issues as well. If you can bring that up as well.
Correct. So just to add to what Sachit said, the overall number which I get from the government website is that we lost about 130 million jobs in this pandemic. There were 130 million jobs which were lost, and there was an equivalent number of employees whose salaries were cut. And obviously, there are companies like Vardhaman, who Sachit is a part of, where people didn't get a haircut or salaries are not cut. But broadly, what I understand is for a large part of industry, whether it's manufacturing or services, at the middle level, not the big brands, but the middle level, there were a lot of salary cuts. There were, in some cases, people didn't actually just paid for ration for the lockdown periods. So it's been a mixed bag in terms of people applying different models at different places. Broadly, but my sense is that the worst hit in terms of people who got lost jobs were in the manufacturing sector, because a lot of the labor went back to the villages, etc., which Sachit is mentioning is coming back. In the services sector, Chatty, I've seen people's salaries being rationalized quite a bit, because everybody is working out of home, their business suffered. So I've seen it all across that there was a lot of rationalization on salary. Even in our own company in Jamboree, where we have employees spread over 39 cities across India, we did ask employees to take a small haircut in terms of salary. So that's my broad sense, that there were different yardsticks applied to different places. As we are seeing in certain sectors like education, e-commerce, the economy rebounding, etc., I think that's going to get phased out as revenues are going to come back, as people's balance sheets are going to come back. But I still feel that in the services sector, especially related to the tourism industry, things are very bad. So I myself know a lot of industrialists who have large resorts within our area of Haryana, Punjab, Himachal, where salaries have not been paid for 5 months. And the situation is looking very bleak there, because they don't foresee these resorts and these restaurants being started. So the recovery of the labor market is looking slow. On IT, consulting, education, I think the recovery is going to be much faster.
So two more subsets here, Pranav. One subset is, white collar workers. Job creation looks probably slower, because Sachit seems to be saying that the blue collar workers, people on the shop floor in manufacturing, are needed, without which plants can't operate. But a lot of IT services, IT enabled services, it seems that a lot of flab has been cut, so to say. And right, that is the first question that I would like you to answer, sir, on the subset.
So, Chatty, you're absolutely right because a lot of businesses like ours, we have about 400 employees in Jamboree. We suddenly realized we didn't need so many people. Our product had become online. We were giving the product online. We had physical centers in 22 cities, as I mentioned, and suddenly we've taken those calls too. So it's been a combination of cutting that flap. You don't need as many people to run a digital platform online service, and at the same time, there has been a combination of haircut at the lower level. So absolutely, you're right that there's going to be a lot more job losses where the income levels were slightly higher because suddenly the whole platform in the services sector has got disrupted. You're working out of home, online, and you just don't need as many number of people to do that job which is getting accomplished on the platform today.
And what about startups? What is your sense? A lot of startups have run out of money. They are not receiving funding. So those job losses are lost forever.
No, Chatty, I don't think they're lost forever. It's just a sentiment issue right now. And Sachit would also be able to answer this question. I feel that though this is a temporary issue of a poor sentiment and people conserving cash, so not investing into venture cap or private equity. But at the same time, let me tell you, a lot of people, because of the disruption this pandemic has caused, is also looking at brand new ideas. There is also a lot of disruptions which are going to come out of the pandemic, and a lot of people are thinking on startups. So funding could be a challenge, but I know at least a dozen of people in the Tri-City and this area who are coming up with newer ideas on interventions in education, interventions in health, and interventions in many other areas which have been disrupted as a result of the pandemic. So I feel the startup funding could be a bit delayed, but there'll be a lot more ideas which will be generated during this time. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year you're going to see a lot more startups just emerging. That's my sense.
Sachit, do you agree? And do you see a lot of tech-based startups helping out manufacturing coming into play?
I guess everyone is figuring out that I think I would agree on one part. What Pranav said is that people are beginning to realize that you don't need, in many cases, as many people as you had. So a company like ours has taken this stand, of course, I don't fire people. So we don't replace anybody who leaves. So in this pandemic, also some people, somebody's wife didn't let him come, or somebody's children, if the people are getting older, their children are saying, I don't need to work and come back home. And some very young trainees, startup people starting their careers, their parents said, don't come. So we have lost some people on those counts. And we found that we didn't need to replace them. Anybody who's retiring, we're not replacing those people. So very clearly, even we are going to have, in the end of this year, lesser number of people than we started off this year with. But we are not firing anybody. So it's just an HR approach that I believe in. Also, as regards the salary cuts that we were talking about earlier, I think, of course, as Pranav said, each company has to see for their own side. You see their own cash flows. If there's a survival issue, clearly you have to cut salaries, you have to lay off people and so on. What we did as a stress test, because as our group and in my company particularly, we believe in a conservative balance sheet. So my first stress test when we started out was, I said, can I survive 1 year if there are zero sales for 1 year and without laying off anybody? And the answer was yes. Yeah, the balance sheet would get weakened considerably. We have to borrow more money and so on. But it was possible to survive for a year with zero sales. Once you did that stress test, then automatically you become relaxed. That if you can survive 1 year with zero sales, then very clearly the people are with you. Because you see, this is also the time to build the relationships with your people, the brand equity as an employer, the kind of motivation and morale that has come up in our teams, and the kind of creativity that's coming in. I am telling you, pre-COVID and pre-lockdown and post-lockdown, it's almost a organization at a different level. So very clearly I'm seeing it. In fact, I'm being asked almost to stay at home. I mean, why you need in the office? I mean, we are doing the work now. Why do you need to come? So very often they send me home, and I'm working from home. But it's good fun.
Yes, Sachit, a lot of people have seen that and now said that okay, working from home is a good option. Why do I need to go back after lunch or get into office early at 8:39 and then work till 2 o'clock and then just come home and work for a couple of hours more in the afternoon. So yes, that's a very good point. And also what you're saying is that creativity and new ideas and new ways of doing the same thing. That is something that will push us in as a nation, maybe make us more Atmanirbhar or whatever word you want, fancy word.
Very clearly, at Vardhaman Steel, we are a stronger organization post this lockdown than people. Very clearly.
Any big breaks that you were expecting that COVID would give, or anything that industry per se, not just your company, but typically from the region or the industry bodies that you represented, that you feel that hey, they could help us, push the recovery better.
So this is an area I think, Chatty, is a very important area you've touched. Our country needs a lot of reforms in so many areas. Like even the Prime Minister in his speech when he announced this 20 lakh crore package. So he announced so many reforms and so many by the Finance Minister on various times after that. So some very major decisions have been taken. So India, I think, always moves when the crisis happens. So in this crisis, some very important steps have been taken. Some more have been taken temporarily. So I wish, especially in labor laws, this is a huge area which makes our Indian industry uncompetitive. And many states have realized that, and they, of course, temporarily have modified those labor laws. For example, number of hours of working, rate of overtime, and so on. These are things that industry has been asking the government for. I myself have been asking for at least 15 years. So maybe longer. People have been asking for a little longer. So these decisions were taken by the government. So the point is but they were taken for a temporary period. So if some of those decisions can be really implemented in the statute, that will be a huge area. So this area of labor laws is a big area. Electioneering Act also, I think this is the time to make those kind of reforms in land, which the Prime Minister already announced. But we hope to see some concrete steps being taken out there. Mining government has already done reforms. Reforms have been done in agriculture procurement. Reforms have been done in defense manufacturing. So many areas reforms have been done. So if this is the time, I think as the Prime Minister said about Atmanirbhar Bharat and making India a part of the global supply chain, if that is a vision and the Prime Minister talked about being competitive, so if all the government departments start seeing that which are the areas which make the Indian industry uncompetitive and make those changes, I think, and this can be a phenomenal opportunity. And added to that is the China factor. With China breathing down our neck, this is the opportunity because of COVID and because of China to become competitive. If we can seize this opportunity, I think it will be phenomenal.
Right, great. So, Atmanirbhar bit, Pranav, coming to you. Ashoka University is one of India's top universities, and this whole move of shifting to A online and B now all these travel restrictions. How does that impact the quality of education, and how does it bring more quality students to stay within India and learn within India?
So, Chatty, as I mentioned earlier, that about 30 million of our people right now go from class 12 to higher education, and just 25% of what should be. So, and this student comprises of various kinds of students coming out of public schools, students coming out of private schools, etc., etc. And the large number is obviously coming out of public schools. So, where Ashoka definitely competes, let me talk about Ashoka and then give a broader perspective. Where Ashoka normally competes is with students who pretty much have marks between 85 to 95%. So, that is our target market of students who probably couldn't get into a Delhi University or a Bombay University or some of the top Indian public universities or colleges just because the cutoffs there had gone to 97, 98%. It was impossible for a good student to get into a good quality education institution in India. So that's where Ashoka is competing. And our sense was that on a particular day you can get a certain mark in a CBSE board, but that doesn't necessarily mean a 85 percentile student is bad or doesn't have the capability to succeed or do well in life. So institutions like Ashoka, and now there are a number of them coming up with that kind of level in the country. We have Kriya now come up in Chennai. Kriya has been founded by Raghuram Rajan. So that's a very good university which has just come up on models of Ashoka. It is on similar lines of philanthropy. We have Mahindra Ecole College. We have Christ College. We have some Shiv Nadar, Bennett Coleman. So there are a crop of Indian private universities now which are coming up, which are probably wanting to get students who are between the 80 to 90% mark range, but wouldn't get a good opportunity to work. And a lot of these students were going abroad. So from the Atmanirbhar perspective, I think these institutions are playing a major role in the sense that a lot of these students would have gone abroad, ended up spending 6x, 7x of the kind of money. For example, in education in the US was approximately about 50 lakhs per annum. And it would vary between 30 to 50 depending on the school and the state you go to in the US. Ashoka education or a Kriya education in a private university education is about 6-7 lakhs per annum. So there is a 7-8 times X factor with the same kind of quality. Now, if you look at so there are a decent number of institutions which have come up, but we need at least expanding this capacity by 3 to 5x in the next 5 years, because we are only 25% of where we should be in terms of sending students. So, and then we come down the range from Ashoka and some of these other top-end private universities. We've not seen any expansion of the public sector university space or college space. Even if there's been space expansion, the government keeps on spending money on education, but that doesn't get good faculty. The curriculum remains the same. There's been no disruption in the curriculum. And universities are not about infrastructure. Universities are all about your pedagogy and curriculum, your faculty, and the teaching methodology and the interdisciplinary nature, etc. But then even if you come down and you look at a kid who gets 60 to 80%, let's look at the second category. You don't really have too many good options in that category, even in India today. So you end up going to I have no problems with a Chandigarh University or a lovely university. They're doing a great job, but because children in that category really do not have an option to go to. So the whole education system, if we have to be Atmanirbhar, really needs a huge amount of rethinking, refocus in terms of getting quality institutions coming and also ramping up capacity. That's my sense.
Right. Great points, Pranav. Let's shift the focus from there to what can stop the recovery. Sachit, other than a second wave, which everybody is predicting based on the 1918 Spanish flu experience of the bubonic plague in London, whenever it was, what other factors do you see that specific to India that can halt recovery or slow down recovery or get the curve down, flatten the curve?
See, so I'm seeing a lot of fear around, and panic. So one is actual problems happening, and second is psychological. If my belief, and this is what I've been seeing for the last 3 months, I've been continuing to have this view, and we've been discussing amongst our friends, some of our friends, that in our country the public is not looking at data and is panicking beyond what is required. So COVID is a problem, there's no doubt about it, it's a serious problem. But look at the deaths, we're having 450 deaths per day. A country of 1.3 billion getting 450 deaths per day, and people are panicking so much, one. And two, there are other kind of people who are disregarding this totally. So you can neither disregard this problem nor should you panic. You need to be careful. You need to take a precaution and so on, but carry on with life, because my belief is COVID is going to continue for the next maybe couple of years. It'll go down, come up and so on. You have to learn to live with it. The other thing which is important is I think people need to focus on their health, because it is very clear that the number of people who are dying most of them are people with comorbidities, and a lot of it is linked to being obese or overweight. So I'm not seeing enough discussions from the top leaderships that please start cutting down, start eating better, start to care your health. So that is one part, and the second part which you asked Pranav earlier is about mental health. As we start becoming more optimistic and start becoming positive, and this is where again leaders across the country, business leaders, educational leaders, and so on, have to be start addressing anxieties of people. And as people become calmer and more positive, we will see on the shoulders of a strong rural economy. I think we can have a very strong recovery very soon. This panic has to go away, and if we can get some reforms done, because keep in mind that the opportunity that we are getting, as many and countries are looking at a China plus strategy. Let's get it clear: no one is going to replace China, but everyone is saying they are too dependent on China. So we need to start looking at other countries and other companies in those countries. And if there are 4 or 5 countries people will look, India will clearly be one.
Sachit, your internet,
Sorry?
your internet's kind of broke over there when you said 4 or 5 countries. Could you give us the
Yeah,
names?
so India is one of those 4 or 5 countries very clearly in everybody's agenda. Whether we will be the one out of the 4 or 5, that is where industry and government need to work together on those reforms that we talked about earlier, which the Prime Minister already alluded to in his speech. So it's not that the Prime Minister has not talked about it. We just want to see action in those areas. I think the next 3 or 4 years can be phenomenal years for the country, provided we take those steps. So if the second wave doesn't come up and this panic, we come out of this panic but retain care. We should not get complacent. I think the next 3 to 5 years can be pretty good years.
Right. So it's a huge opportunity that you are saying that it's a huge building block to so to say for the government to take stock of and build on that. And in terms of competition, geopolitics, China has given us a great opportunity, especially the way we've handled the dark standoff, the Agarwal Valley and everything. And then China's a lot of people now are not very happy dealing with China. UK yesterday said Dubai would not be welcome in the UK, and the Chinese foreign ambassador to them threatened them in some way. UK या तो हमारे दोस्त बन जाओ वरना अच्छा नहीं होगा kind of threat. So those kind of opportunities are there. What will Indian industry per se do to capture those opportunities if the policies stay the same?
3, 4 things I think we can still do despite the policies don't change. One, we need to start believing in ourselves that we can get there, but we are not there. What happens with India very often with people, if we start believing that we can be there, we believe they've already reached there. So we must understand we are not there, but we can get there. 1. 2, to get there, this is the time to build partnerships, joint ventures, strategic alliances, because this is a time when other countries and companies in other countries are looking at opportunities. For example, this is public information. The Japanese government has offered $2 billion as a total fund for companies to move out of China. Now, $2 billion is not too much. It's a signal that please start looking out. And this is the opportunity for companies in India to look for partnerships. Because to become part of the global supply chain, if you form partnerships, you become part of the global chain much faster. Now, when you form partnerships, you have to change your mentality. That are we open to sharing stuff? Are we professionalizing more? Are we looking at systems-oriented working or just one-man show? So those are the things that we have to graduate for many SMEs to move away from one-man show to professionalism and to look for partnerships and to look at more transparency in the ways of working. And then to follow a structured way of improvement, whether a TPM or a TQM or a Six Sigma, any method, lean, but some method of systematic method of continuous improvement. Those things if we are able to build together, I think this is a phenomenal opportunity for India.
Pranav, does the services sector feel the same way?
Chatty, obviously the services sector, if you feel, is very intertwined with the manufacturing sector. So what Sachit said is very right. If you see major areas of manufacturing growing, For example, I feel a very big opportunity. I'll come to the services side, but I just want to add in a few more points to what Sachit said. There are 3 to 4 areas where I see a phenomenal opportunity in manufacturing, where supply chains need to be disrupted, and especially areas where government of India is giving a lot of subsidies. So first of all is pharmaceuticals. So pharmaceuticals, we import 70% of our bulk drugs for our domestic consumption and starting materials from China, which is valued at about 30 to 40,000 crores. So today, if there's a war between China and India, hypothetical war, or if it's an actual war, we might not have real drugs to even make crocine or make basic antibiotics. The second sector is electronics. The third sector is medical devices. So in all these 3 sectors, and then obviously other sectors like the automobile sector, the various other sectors, but these 3 specific sectors where the government of India now has come up with very, very good policies. And they are giving huge subsidies in terms of setting up mega parks. There's going to be a capital subsidy for creating world-class infrastructure, and there's going to be production-related subsidies. So I feel these are 3 very prominent areas where a lot of companies from all over the world are going to be looking at moving their supply chains. And as Sachit said, we've got to get our act right. First, I would say that we have to make sure that whatever the government promises delivers on table. There's a huge issue in India of ease of doing business in India. Government says something in a policy, and when it translates into ground, it's very difficult to navigate all this. And secondly, I think there has to be a mindset change, as Sachit said, in terms of companies, how to take these partnerships forward. And I feel that if we are able to grab these opportunities, if we are able to take advantage of these 3 huge policies and get more manufacturing people commit in these 3 sectors only, where the subsidies are very large. Obviously, the services sector, Chatty, goes along with it. You get more expats coming in, you have the whole GDP growing, and the services moves along. Then you need more hotels, you need more restaurants, you need more consultants, you need more legal advisors, you need schools for education. So it's actually really linked a lot with the growth in the manufacturing sector. And Sachit has actually said it right, that if we are able to get our act right, there's a huge opportunity. People all over the world want to disrupt, want to change their supply bases from China, which they're very, very dependent on. And India is standing at a threshold now, and they're able to get this business. Next 3 to 5 years are looking extremely good. Primarily first starting off with the manufacturing sector, and obviously the services sector then follows it.
Sachit, one thing we really haven't touched upon is Ludhiana is a big export hub, right? From the SME sector perspective. Are we seeing that SMEs are now focusing post-COVID on more on quality and things are they approaching exports differently from what they were pre-COVID? Are there some signals coming to you from that area?
I'm sorry, I have not heard of, I'm not aware of any such thing, but if I look at our company for Vardhaman Textile, clearly exports are driving the growth, recovery back. So I think exports is a huge opportunity. But one area I think the government also needs to work more is in the areas of interest rate reduction. Still, the interest rates are very high. Considering that this year we are still expecting, despite this recovery, overall we are still expecting GDP shrinkage. So if you are expecting a GDP shrinkage, our interest rates are still too high, and the rupee is which had weakened a bit is becoming stronger again. So we need the interest rates to go down and the rupee to weaken a bit to make exports more competitive. But no country can grow at 8% or 9% without exports growing at least 2 to 3%. If you look back in the time earlier when the sustained basis we grew at 8%, exports were growing at 2%, 2 to 3% clearly in real terms. So exports has to be looked at very seriously. For that, cost of money and the rate of the rupee dollar is an important area.
I would like to touch a little bit. I've heard from a lot of people that the quality in terms of export, Indians tend not to be very perfectionist about that. So, since you are driving that, some thoughts on that?
Oh, I think very, very important point. As I said, so we need to start looking inwards as organizations. What are we doing on the? That's why I said all those quality systems. In our company, in our steel company, last year we got in a joint venture partner from Japan. So Japan's Toyota Group's own steel company which makes 80% of steel for Toyota, became our partner, Aichi Steel Corporation. And we started working together really from January this year. In the 6 months that we've been working together, I have seen tremendous improvement in our people's way of thinking, the way of approaching problems, the approach towards safety, the approach to how to develop people, and so on. So Vardhaman was already a more professional company than many other companies. But I have seen in our own company, after our partners have come in, there's a huge change in the attitude coming in. And this is why earlier, if you recall, I talked about getting these partners. But forming joint ventures and forming strategic alliances becomes an important way of gaining that knowledge and shortcutting the entire period. Otherwise, for an entrepreneur who's a one-man show, very often the urgent takes precedence over the important. And it's urgent to go to the bank and go to the government and see the labor inspector who's come in and purchasing today and getting the orders. Those things become more important than focusing on internal improvements, on sustained quality improvements, and so on. So one way of shortcutting it is getting these partners, and we have benefited a lot. And if I look at Vardhaman Group as a whole over the last 25 years of having strategic alliances across various parts of our business with Japanese companies and one American company, each one of our strategic alliances, we have benefited tremendously.
Pranav, does the services be exports qualitatively? I think India is at the cutting edge probably on services. But is it a very cost competitive market? Is India losing out to other countries which are providing similar services at lower cost? Is that a challenge in India now?
So Chatty, I think in the IT and the IT tech-enabled services, which forms I think bulk of our services sector, I think there has been that factor in terms of India losing out market share to companies in Latin America, companies in East Europe, and China and Southeast Asia. So that continues to be a factor as a cost of living and incomes go up. But as I broadly said, that if our manufacturing sector keeps pace and if we take advantage of the opportunity, look, we have to increase the size of the pie. We have to increase our economy is about $3 trillion. So we have to, and this year we're going to probably, the estimates are degrow at about 4 to 5%, right? That's the estimates put forward by the IMF this year. So if our pie grows, I think there's going to be tons and tons of opportunity coming out of that pie, and the services sector will expand as a result of being a significant portion of that pie. But at the same time, we do have challenges of higher cost of living. A lot of the tech-enabled services are in the big metropolitan cities. A lot of that manpower is placed there where the cost of living is higher. And as our income levels, cost of living standards are going up, that would be a challenge. But I don't foresee that as a major challenge going forward if we keep expanding and growing the size of the economy.
Sachit, a lot of young people are viewing this today. So one thing is work ethics is something that I would want to touch upon. Have you seen a change in work ethics post the lockdown?
Yes, largely positive and some negative also. So largely the positive part is people are valuing their jobs, because as Pranav said earlier also, in many companies there have been layoffs and people have been let go. So people who got their jobs and people whose salaries have been protected, they are feeling grateful clearly, and they are changing. I can see the change in the attitude. They want to do more, they want to deliver, they want to show their gratitude. So that's a positive. I'm also seeing in some cases, because very often the youngsters who are working in companies maybe from different cities, from their parents may be in different cities and they've come to different cities to work. Now this is where what I talked earlier about panic, when there's fear everywhere and parents saying, oh, let my child come back to me and so on, So those kind of attitudes and the ability of youngsters to stand up to their parents, that look, I've got a good job, I'm not leaving and coming back, and things are okay. So this is where we need to understand as a society that there is a problem? Yes. Is it a serious problem? Yes. Is it so big that we want to and shelter ourselves in our home? How long are we going to stay at home for? 6 months, 1 year, 2 years? Or you're going to be working? So there are people who've actually left their company because their parents didn't allow them to work. So those are things we need to change. But overall, I think whenever I blame somebody else, there's one finger out here, three fingers are back at me. So what are we as leaders, as senior people in the organizations, as senior members of society, what are we doing as parents, what are we doing to inculcate better work ethic? So if we are showing a discipline, the younger generation is smarter than us. They will follow through. So if we show indiscipline, they will also be more indisciplined than us. I'll give you one example, just one example. There's one person who said to his boss that in our company you're allowed 5 minutes of delayed time. So 9 o'clock is the time, up to 9:05 you're treated on time. He said all his working life he had come at 9:05. He started coming to office at 8:35 after this problem. He said he changed in him and he realized that I want to see things differently. So nobody asked him to because he was following the discipline, but he started coming at 8:30. This is one example, and there are several such examples of people showing really positive attitude.
Right. I think we lost Pranav's on the internet somewhere. He's off the screen, so we'll get back. So, is COVID also not being used by some people to restructure themselves in terms of their organization, not just in terms? Yeah. So, if you could throw some light on that.
Oh yes, very clearly, as Pranav said earlier, many people realize that do I need so many people? So, and as some people have not come back from their villages and they decided not to come, or some people, as I said, these kids, or some people, somebody's parents, somebody's older out here, and the kids say that I don't want my parents to be working anymore, and so on. I can support them. So, as those people leave, this is an opportunity to reduce the number of people. Two, work from home becomes a very attractive opportunity, and you say, do you need so many offices? And maybe shrink the size of your offices. It doesn't shrink the manufacturing operations, but even manufacturing organizations have non-manufacturing services within themselves, purchasing, marketing, and so on. So this is the time to restructure those organizations. Third, accounting. Do you need all the accountants in office? Or can you think of using this time to see, can you change your system to have there are many housewives who don't want to come out and work because of small kids, but want to work for 3-4 hours. They're competent, educated, want to work and can do good work. So 3-4 hours, can you think of those kind of things, that some of the services, can you offload to those people? So those are the kind of thoughts that we have to work with. But I see clearly organizations and top managements are definitely, Zoom calls. I had never used a Zoom call before this. And suddenly you're being more effective and you can attend more conferences and attend more board meetings and so on. So you can get in experts for small things. So we have to start imagining things very differently.
Right. As you were discussing, probably your next annual general meeting will be on a Zoom call. If this continues, the limit on 50 people. So Pranav, we lost you for a short while. But we were saying that in terms of work ethics from the services industry, is there a feedback? Is there an improvement that people are working from home? We can't hear you, Pranav. We can't hear you. There's no audio. I think there's a problem with his audio. Pranav, still no. No. You need to log out and log in. Yeah, I think he'll come back. So yeah, we discovered StreamYard because of the pandemic. We didn't know StreamYard existed, and the technology we are using today to simultaneously go to Facebook and to YouTube, and we then also do an Instagram offload of this. So it's amazing. Who could have thought? Our not-for-profit playwright, we could connect with a lot of people, sportsmen like Greg Chappell and Ian, both from we were able to get these guys in. So Pranav, just check your mic. Is it okay? No? Okay, Pranav's mic is not working. Suddenly some tech challenge seems to have come up. So, some thoughts on the recovery, final thoughts. We're nearly at the end of our discussion anyways. So, Sachit, what are the key takeaways now for the recovery?
I think the key takeaway is that when the next crisis comes, of course, remain prepared in advance. And we were prepared. We didn't anticipate this crisis, but we were prepared with a strong balance sheet. So,
Right,
very clearly, having a strong balance sheet at all times
right,
is a must. Two, to have a strong management bench with you. I must compliment my team, who's my deputies who are working with me, all my heads of department. They have shown exemplary work. So you have to value your people. I've always done that, but the value of those people comes out even more clearly. The way people have in this pandemic, the kind of duty hours people have shown, the kind of responsibility people have taken is fantastic. So I would say invest in your people, invest in your teams, and invest in your systems, because very important things get neglected in the face of the urgent. So delegation. In fact, I'm pushing delegation very hard in our organization from my next line to the line below that, so they have more time to look at more improvement and developmental activities and so on. So I would say, and I must say again that the partner that I got just in time, my partners joined us in November last year. So that happened just in time. It's a phenomenal thing to have a strong partner. So my advice to everybody is take your time to find a partner. But if you have strong ambitions, have a partner with you who shares your value system and who shares your long-term goal. I think you'll be better off with them than without them.
Pranav, you speak a few words, please. That we know you're back on. No, we still can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Okay, so I think we'll kind of end the discussion here. Thank you, Pranav. Thank you, Sachit. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your inputs. And we hope to join you soon in 3, 4, 6 months' time and find out, how strong the balance sheets have become and the recovery is going. Thanks to Rural India, Atmanirbhar, and all the other words we use today. Have a nice evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Look forward. Bye bye.
Bye.